As a heads up, there will be discussion of suicide and suicidal ideation in today's conversation. So take care of yourself. Welcome to Like Minded with Dr. Patrice. Each episode, we'll be sitting down with different types of experts and unpacking the role of mental health in our day to day lives. My name is Dr. Patrice Lagoy. I'm an international psychologist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and former entertainment executive. In this episode, we will discuss what's really at stake for the minority communities, including the disabled community in America during a time of civil and social unrest due to the current government administration. My guest today is Kelsey Lindell, a disability inclusion advisor and the founder and CEO of Misfit Media. A passionate advocate, Kelsey has educated 750,000 creative professionals on inclusion strategies to produce inclusive work that drives results with the disabled community. She is here today to share a personal journey, the systematic challenges she faces daily, and how the current administration is failing the American population, and specifically in marginalized communities. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I wanted to start with something that you've shared with me, and you've shared with other people before, but you've described yourself as a suicide survivor, and someone whose mental health has been deeply affected by political attacks on your rights. Can you walk us
Yeah.
through that experience and explain how it's shaped you in the present and how you present yourself today as an advocate and leader?
Yeah. So the two they're separate, but they're related, right?
Mm,
So I have had mental health struggles from my earliest memory. The first time I ever thought about, um, the first time I contemplated suicide, I was 12 years old.
okay.
And I mean, I'm disabled. I jokingly refer to myself as the EGOT of disability. I have four disabilities, one of which is I'm physically disabled. So I was born missing
Mhm.
half of my left arm. I was bullied ruthlessly growing up. Kids make fun of what they don't understand, which always makes
Yes.
disabled kids low-hanging fruit.
Mm,
We're just the easiest on the chopping block. And I didn't really have friends in my school system growing up. And so the first time I ever contemplated suicide, I was 12. So I don't want to give too much power to the Trump administration because it's its own thing,
it's not
right?
only that,
Um,
yes.
yeah. And I was raised very evangelical, very conservative. Like my last name is Lindell and I live in Minnesota. And I'm not related to the My Pillow guy, but I might as well be. Like that is how deep it goes in my family, right? Like Jesus in America, it's basically the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was always really interesting because I was a deeply spiritual person. So I was brought up in like a really conservative Christian church environment
Hmm.
where like women were not permitted to speak. Like
Yeah.
I had an uncle who didn't go to a family wedding because there was going to be a woman reading from the Bible there. Like that's how
Well,
conservative we're talking. And
yes.
so eventually, long story short, moved overseas, worked in international aid for quite a while, and then eventually moved back to the States to work on disability focused issues here, specifically regarding representation and how we're represented and how that changes people's perceptions. But there was some time in there where I just mostly identified as apolitical and just wanted people to have what they needed. And when the Trump administration or when Trump started running for office and, for the 2016 election originally, which is obviously started ages before then, I saw his rhetoric and I was like, well, surely no one's going to vote for this. Like, surely no one I know is
Yeah.
going to vote for this. So I was raised in a completely different mindset that I have now.
Okay.
And I moved overseas and just honestly to do like international aid work. And it's one of the best things that ever happened to me because it separated church and state from me. Whereas in the
Mm,
States, church and, politics are so intertwined.
that's right.
And internationally, that's not always the case. Like, obviously, colonialism is a thing and um, Christianity did some horrible things around the world throughout history. I'm not trying to, gloss over that. It absolutely is. But it's not as political as it is in
Yeah.
the States.
Yeah. It's a unique
And
environment in the
so
States. Hmm.
yeah, definitely. And so seeing that and kind of pulling myself out of that, I was sort of identifying as apolitical, but deeply invested in love and human rights. And I just wanted people to be okay. Um, and then when I moved back to the States, Donald Trump started running for president not
Okay.
too long after
So
that.
you moved back
And
in 2015, 2016?
I moved back in 2014,
Okay.
so about like a year later,
Okay.
his campaigns kind of
Hmm.
started whatever. And At first it was just rumblings, and I was like, there's no way anyone that I know is gonna like, if he goes for the public, he'll never get the nomination. People won't vote for that. And then like slowly but surely, as he gained more and more support, it just kind of disrupted my entire foundation, right? Because in the United States, church and republicanism, or evangelicalism and republicanism,
Yes.
are so intertwined, right? We know that once Republicans couldn't mandate that schools be segregated anymore, that's when they jumped onto abortion, and that's when they took that as their main topic to try to win votes to oppress people, right? So we know that there's a long history there, but I didn't know that, right? So I'm
Yes.
watching this and I'm like, how is it possible that everyone who loved me and taught me like how to be a human and how to care for others and built this entire foundation of my upbringing could buy into this? Like, how is it possible? And
Right.
when
And
I
I want to understand, Kelsey, like what was happening for you emotionally, like as you're coming to this realization. I think first of all, having been out of the country, right, and having those different experiences, and then
yeah,
coming back and seeing what's happening here and seeing on a micro level what's happening in your family. What were the emotions that you were going through?
I cried a lot. I was really
Yeah.
angry and I was confused. I think that's probably
Mm.
the primary one, was just confusion. Like,
Yes.
how is this possible? Like, what is going on here? And, at that point he still didn't have the nomination. So I was like, okay, like we'll see what happens. But as he got it, and then he started making fun of disabled reporters
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
making, really obviously ableist attacks. Like, I didn't want to support him because of everything he stood for, the way that he treated women, the way that he spoke about black people, the way that he spoke about shithole countries.
Yeah.
I was furious. But I think the final straw for me in like processing, watching all of my family just go and support him, was when he started overtly mocking people with disabilities and saying that they'll never become anything.
Yes.
And, his plans to gut the services that made it so that I could be independent. My parents would definitely never say like we love all of his policies, but they would be like, we're economically conservative. And I was like, well, Dad, like the only way that I am able to support myself right now independently is because of all of the early interventions that Trump wants to get rid of when I was little. Like,
Yes.
the two ways that I paid my bills were teaching fitness, which I was definitely had all kinds of IEPs for physical education and health and wellness growing up, because I couldn't pass a lot of the things, the like standardized testing. And then literally writing. I couldn't write until I was 6 years old because I have disabilities in both hands. I had to go to a lot of occupational therapy, physical therapy, and I had 11 surgeries before I was 6. And none of that would have been possible without government systems. And so
Yes.
realizing this and not understanding how intertwined they were was just like really, really
Yeah.
destabilizing.
Well, and Kelsey, how did those conversations go? Because I'm sure that really did hit home for you, and
Yeah,
you knew, and not only did you know the things that you needed, but obviously your family experienced that with you. So,
yeah,
so how
yeah.
did those conversations go when you pointed that out to them?
Not good. Like, I mean, I barely see my family anymore. You know
Uh,
what I mean? And not because I don't love them. I do. It's just if, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is it's both deeply personal and very systemic, right? So
yes.
on a personal level, that hit the first time this administration was in office, it hit so personally because I was like, how could all of these people that I love
Hmm.
vote for this? How could they not read between the lines? How could they not pay attention? And I think a lot of them got to kind of play ignorance, right? They're like, oh, he won't actually do that. It'll
He's
be
just saying that,
fine.
but he's not going to
Like,
do it.
he's just
Yes.
saying
Yes.
that. No, no way. No way. Like, you're overreacting. It's not going to be that bad. It'll be fine. And, um, as rhetoric grew and as things got more and more divided in the country, and we saw that he wasn't playing around, like, the administration really does want to defund all of these programs. They do want to take away disabled people's civil and human rights. It really opened up my eyes a lot. And I think, listen, like I said, I've always struggled with mental health. Like, the first time I ever wanted to kill myself, I was 12 years old. And I also didn't have the greatest home life. This might shock you now, hearing some of how conservative we were. Like, not great for mental health if women
Yes.
can't speak. But it got to like another level, and it got to a point where I just felt like I couldn't trust my own surroundings. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't trust my own brain. I couldn't trust my own consciousness. I was just constantly felt like I was being gaslit. Like, no, it's actually not that bad. Like it's going to be fine. Meanwhile, I know people who are losing rights and access, and
Absolutely.
I know social workers who are struggling to meet their students' basic needs, and knowing that like that would be me. I would be that child that's
Right?
losing access to
Your
all of
life could have been
these
very
things.
different if you didn't have those.
Yeah. And it's only an immense amount of privilege that my life is the way it is, and like we're all 2 seconds away from becoming disabled. Like one of my I joke I'm the EGOT of disability. I have 4 disabilities, only one is visible, but one of them is I was hit by a car as a pedestrian, right? I was just going for a walk and a
Yeah.
car decided to play Frogger with me. And so we don't realize how close any of us are, and it doesn't have to be an adult, it could be a child. Most of us will become disabled if we're lucky enough to enter into old age. And so realizing that like no, this is actually a huge issue, and it's not just impacting me, and it's not just impacting a few people. 25% of the population has some form of a disability. And so for people that I loved, who I trusted, to say, no, 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 we care about you, but we don't care about anyone else, was just so destabilizing. And I think also, like, it wasn't just my parents. Like, I was so embedded in the church growing up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
every Sunday, all day long, every Wednesday night, every after school activity. Like, my dad was like, or not my dad, my stepdad was the worship minister at one of our churches. At
Uh-huh.
the other church, my dad was involved in every single tech thing. My mom and my stepmom taught Sunday school. We were a part of church choir. Like it was our whole life growing up. So then to see everything you were a part of that taught you to be compassionate and taught you to be kind, just completely doing a 180,
Yes.
just
Well,
felt so
and also I
destabilizing.
imagine like the loss for you of feeling this like disconnect from your family and your community, and then also from, your religion, which is such a big part of your
Yeah.
life. I mean, I can imagine that
Yeah.
would be very destabilizing for you,
Yeah.
to have both of those
Well,
major losses.
I think one of the things that was really hard is it wasn't just my family that I had just essentially lost
Yes.
to this crazy ideology. I had just moved back from South Africa. I had just left a huge support system and amazing chosen family, and I really didn't have friends here, right? So like most of your adult friends, you make them at
Through work and
university.
yes, and
I went to
school. Hmm.
Bible college in South Africa. Like I studied theology. Like that's how deep
Wow,
into this I was,
really?
right? Like trust me, I do. Well, I mean, I always joke. I'm like, no, I do what a pastor actually should do. Like, I care about people and I communicate about topics that matter. Um, but no, like that's what my background was. So when I moved here, I didn't have any close friends. Like my friends from high school had either moved away or had gone to university and were living somewhere else, or they just, we weren't that close anymore. I had just left everything I knew and everyone I knew that was like a new part of my ecosystem, literally 48 hours by plane
Yes.
away, depending, well, at that point it was 48 hours because I was taking the cheapest flight I could find. But, they're really far away. I didn't have anyone here. And just being completely alone constantly with my thoughts and feeling like I couldn't trust my brain. I didn't have anyone to depend on anymore. And also, I was working as a group fitness instructor and I was working in strategy for a gym, but like we didn't have great mental health care plans. I
Yes.
couldn't afford therapy. I
Yes.
couldn't afford therapy. And it was interesting because I was also being like literally put on the side of buses and billboards as a model for disabled talent for like all kinds of different fitness brands because that was what my job was. And I looked like I had like made it on paper, and
Yes.
all I could think about was dying. Like I just didn't want to be alive. I was like, I don't trust, like none of this is worth it. Like why are we here?
Yeah. Well,
What is
and
going on?
for you, Kelsey, was it like the isolation, like the disconnection from community, like the losses that
Yeah.
you experienced, like what
Yep.
was happening, for you?
Yeah,
Like what yeah.
I think I was really struggling to find my community
Okay.
and find people who had
Yes.
shared values, right? Who like had and I like honestly for years just completely walked away from anything spiritual, even though it's a huge part of who I am and what I believe, right? I couldn't touch it. I didn't want to be associated with anything. Like I still don't. Up until a year ago when my PR person forced me to change my bio, My Instagram handle said not one of those Christians.
Oh,
Like, genuinely, I
interesting.
was like, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to
Ah,
be associated with it.
yeah.
And so it was like literally like a huge part of me had to die in order for me to cope and keep
Mm,
moving on. Like I had to like kill that side of me for a long time. And I didn't have friends. I mean, I had friends, but not like close friends.
yeah.
Um, my resources were scarce. I didn't have the capacity to invest in mental health support that I needed. My family was the source of all of this pain in a lot of ways. And when I would speak to them about it, it was, like I said, the conversations didn't go well. There was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of fighting, and there was just this level of we don't care,
Yeah.
this level of apathy that when you look at like what's going to happen and how it's going to impact people, I just couldn't wrap my mind around people not caring. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I have ADHD. That's one of my
Mm-hmm.
disabilities that I was diagnosed with later.
Mm-hmm.
And am in the process of pursuing an autism diagnosis. And there's something that happens a lot with people who are neurodivergent called rejection, or there's rejection sensitivity, there is justice sensitivity. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sensitivities to
Yes.
like what's wrong in the world and what's wrong and what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just got to a point where I couldn't ignore it, and it felt so consuming, and I didn't have anyone to process it with, and I didn't trust my own brain, and I didn't trust everything that I believed. And I think that's another thing is like growing up, I was taught to believe that like God had a plan and everything would work out eventually,
I see.
and I didn't believe that anymore.
Tell
I
me
didn't
about
have
not
hope.
trusting your own brain because you've used that
Yeah.
phrase before. What did that mean for you that you didn't trust your own brain?
Mm. It meant that every thought I would have, because, in the past I'd be like, oh no, like I felt like if I would feel something intuitively, or if I would feel like if I would try to listen to my subconscious,
Uh-huh.
right? There were things that felt like my subconscious, or like if I had listened spiritually, I had believed that were actually rooted in white supremacy,
Mm.
right? And the more that I unpacked a lot of my background, a lot of my anti-racism journey, prior to this, I had learned like, oh no, actually that's a message that is actually about colonialism, or that's a
Yeah.
message that was used to marginalize a lot of people,
Can
or
you
that's a
can you give
message
me
that
an
was used.
example, Kelsey, of some of the realizations that you
Oh
had?
yes, I mean, sure. I mean, even just like in South Africa, right? Like the concept of missionaries, of people in the United States being funded by churches to go and quote unquote save people.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
that's a tool of colonialism, right?
Yes.
Like that's
Mm-hmm.
imperialism. Hello.
Yeah.
And so all of these things that I thought were good, I was unpacking my anti-racism journey. I was like, oh, no, this is how slavery was
Yes.
condoned, and this is how
Yes.
all of these other systemic issues were condoned. I don't trust any of my brain anymore,
Yeah.
like to just like know myself. And so I think it was a really important part of my journey to go on, but not having the support system surrounding me while I unpacked a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
was really challenging.
Yeah.
Really, really
The
challenging.
bringing up the missionary part of it, I think it's so interesting. I growing up, I attended always like religious schools as well, and it was like you were always funding like a missionary effort, and that was seen as something really good, and it is good to go and help people who are in need, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that they need to be changed somehow or like saved, as you say, like
Yes.
that they are not enough as they are, is where like that messaging comes in that we have to learn to question, as we like get out of those environments and say, actually, that doesn't add up, to me. That's not my experience when I see people and I go places. They don't need me to rescue them necessarily,
Right.
and I think coming to that realization, because it's part of that nuance, where there's all these great things that you get, from religion and faith and like social
Yeah.
support, right? And then there's things that don't vibe with who you want to be in the world, and then
Totally.
what of those things can you keep? What makes sense for you? And then what are those things that don't work for you, that feel unaligned with you?
Totally. And I think, one of the best things that ever happened to me was the organization that I work for. I will tell you, but I don't lead it with it publicly very often, was Hillsong Church.
Okay.
So Hillsong Church, if
Uh-huh.
for listeners who
I
aren't
have,
aware,
yes.
it's a
Heard of Hillsong.
giant mega church,
It's a mega church for sure.
known for Justin Bieber
Hmm.
and Carl Lenz.
Yes.
And I often joke that they tried to turn me into the next Carl Lenz. They probably figured, well, if we can take him and turn him into this pastor, we can take her and turn her into this. Like
Oh,
I
interesting,
the
Kelsey.
reason I'm so good at public speaking is not because I'm good at public speaking. It's because Hillsong tried to turn me into a megachurch. church pastor. Um, and I joke that like they accidentally created their worst nightmare because now I have all the chops to do what they taught me
Had
to do
no
when I was
idea what they
struggling
were
for
doing.
I know. It's honestly hilarious. Karma for them, I guess. But what I will like thank God or goddess, I believe in a gender neutral higher being. What I think one of the best gifts that she ever gave me was connecting me with their nonprofit foundation, and their nonprofit foundation had a leader who, you know, it was separate from the church but like connected at the same time. It wasn't a part of the church, it was their arm that does good in society. And the leader was excellent in that he taught us never to just go in and say, here's what we need to do, but rather just go ask, what do you need?
Listen,
And
yes.
that's still what we do in all of my work within my company. We're a consulting agency for brands, and we always say, don't just tell them what you're going to do. Ask people what they want and make sure it aligns with your values. And if you do
Yes.
that, you're not going to lose, right? And so thank heavens that
Yes.
I had that leader who was like, no, we're actually not going to go tell them. We're going to ask them. Like, if you think as a respectfully idiot 19-year-old who's going through Bible college right now that you know better what this community needs than them, you should maybe rethink that, you know?
Yes.
And like they were able to like help me see that, and I got to like live it out and see it happening in real time, and I'm so grateful for that experience.
Yeah, that's
And
such a great
I
life
think
lesson and just thing to keep in mind for all of us, right? When we're encountering people is that
totally.
they probably know themselves better than you ever will. And that's
Oh,
okay.
100%. And like it doesn't, especially when you're like completely ignorant in a topic, like
Yes.
the best thing you can do is just shut up and ask questions. Like
Yes.
ask questions, listen, and make decisions based on what they tell you they
That's right.
need,
That's
right?
right.
Whether it's, yeah, I mean, I think it's just humanity 101. Like
Well, and
you
even
can
when
also
you're
learn
an
that
expert on a topic, right? You're not ever going to be an expert on other people's individual
their topic.
experiences.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. You're an expert on mental health, but you don't know my
I
mental health,
don't.
right? So like
I know what you tell me.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is why you're
Yes.
like, okay, well, how was that? How
Hmm.
was that conversation? Well, not good. And if I had told you it was amazing, they'd be like, okay, fantastic. Uh, it's really interesting. So yeah, seeing, I think I've been having some really interesting conversations with my husband lately. My grandfather just passed, and so
Sorry.
it's so fascinating too, Dr. Patrice, because my parents are so conservative, and their parents from Grand Forks, North Dakota, not that way.
Interesting.
Which is like my grandpa was a dairy farmer and voted Democrat his entire life. Like
Huh.
I don't know, I genuinely don't have the spoons to like dive into that with my parents right now because I'm just still processing like him
Understood, but
grieving.
it's something interesting to think about, right? And then to look at
Totally.
your own experience and how different that is, right? That for then your parents and then your grandparents. It's really fascinating.
Well, and we in the process of my grandfather passing, we drove to and from North Dakota many times to
Mm,
like care for him in hospice,
okay,
say goodbye, be there for the funeral, and saw all of my extended family, which is
a lot.
uh, a lot, yeah. And on the way back, one of the times I was just like in tears, just thinking about like I feel really bad for my family in a lot of ways
Mm,
because so many of them, like my dad, is very, very intelligent, got lots of great scholarships, is an electrical engineer, like
yeah.
principal at his company, great, fantastic. Not all of his siblings had that. And so when I look at my cousins and their views that are even more like MAGA
Mm,
and bigoted, but then I look at like what's around them, like what do they have for resources? Like what do they have to learn? Nothing. Like they're in propaganda machines. Do you know what I mean?
yes.
Like there's no interventions. I mean, it's one of the reasons that education is so important, why social services are so important.
Hmm.
I think about so many of my cousins who have been in and out of jail because of like drugs or DUIs, and then their life spirals, and then
Of
they just get
course.
in these like
Loops.
communities that are
Yes.
only, they need a scapegoat because their life is miserable. So who's easy to blame?
Right.
Oh, marginalized communities. And
Yes.
like I was just, telling my husband how I'm so angry at these people. And I also feel so bad for them
Mm,
because they are a part of this propaganda system. Like I think about how different their lives might be and their perspectives might be. Like they may have a very different perspective shift if they had the privilege of not being so resources scarce and
Yeah.
not feeling so like, oh, this is my only opportunity. Like my dad couldn't do this, so therefore I can't do that. And here's like, they wouldn't be as susceptible to it, but because, republicanism and MAGA and cutting back on social services, it harms
It
disabled
does.
people
It
and it
does.
harms black people and it
Yes.
harms but it harms everyone eventually. Do you know what I mean? Like
That's
you
right.
know
That's
this.
right.
Like
It's just a matter of
there's
time.
no exactly. And so it's really interesting to see them as white people not realize that they are in these same systems.
Yes. Well, Kelsey, you have such a unique perspective because it is, close family and you have a different
Mhm,
experience in some ways, right? And then they have different privileges in other ways. And for you
mhm.
to see that and to see how, maybe your trip, you're working, in aid work like that, how that changed your life and changed your perspective.
Yeah,
And if you didn't have that,
yeah,
what things might have been different for you. And likewise,
totally.
when people can get trapped in their situations and, those kinds of things, the negative like experiences they're having, the challenges they're having can spiral. They also
Hmm.
get, trapped in a
Totally.
place where it's difficult to think about other people. It's difficult to know
Yep.
that, you are other people. And that,
Totally.
and that
Totally.
you are
Yeah.
you are susceptible to all of these things as well. I think you have such a different kind of experience because whether you like it or not, you are, experiencing different like diversity, right, in views
Mhm.
and yes,
Yeah.
in life.
Well, and it's been really interesting to look at like, our white Midwestern family
Yes.
and look at it from like a diversity perspective in terms of class,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like
Absolutely.
I went to Bible college. Wouldn't give me a job here unless I wanted to work for Hillsong. But that's okay. I built my own business. Nobody needs to know. Um, but some of my cousins went to for university or went on to get masters or
Mhm.
doctorates or PhDs, and they're like extremely intelligent.
Mm.
Not that the other ones aren't necessarily intelligent. Degree doesn't significant it doesn't mean you are or are not intelligent,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of opportunities that come with
Yes, that's
that,
right.
right? And the ones that got degrees were because their parents also did really well. And my cousins that have gotten the degrees and been able to find more opportunities for themselves don't have the bigoted views. Maybe they don't
No.
have as progressive of views as I do
Yes.
because Hillsong turned me into a monster, but they're not they're not gonna they're not MAGA people. But
Yeah,
then the folks
interesting.
that I have an uncle who struggled with drug addiction, and like now, the more that I have learned about neurodiversity and how it functions in families and the late diagnosis, I'm like, oh no, he's definitely neurodivergent and just was never
Yes.
diagnosed and therefore treated with drugs and alcohol. And then his kids didn't have the opportunities, and now his kids are struggling with some of these same things.
Uh,
So, yes, yeah, it's just really interesting to look at it from like a class dynamic as well
mhm.
and try to understand, like, listen, not giving anyone a pass. Like, eh, you had all of the information that you needed
Yes.
to not vote for this. But it's really interesting when, I think that's one of the things that I am trying to deal with a lot now that this has happened again because, the second time this came around, um, first time was bad enough. Second time was just second and third times were so brutal. I remember the Biden election. So one of my other disabilities is
Mhm.
I have stage 5 endometriosis, and so if your listeners don't know what that is, it is a reproductive disease
Mhm.
where your lining of your uterus grows outside of your uterus and gets wrapped around all kinds of other organs,
Yes.
and it's around pretty much every internal organ that I have. So it's not just a reproductive disease, it's a constant
Mm.
disease. And I went from being able to teach 15 group fitnesses a week and then work a full-time production job to not being able to get out of bed for 2 years straight.
Oh, wow.
And it was just debilitating pain. My husband would literally have to help me get out of bed just to use the bathroom. Like, it was horrible. And thank God we are at a much better place now.
Good.
But one thing that's always on our mind is fertility. And talking to my parents about
Mhm.
that, and because that's their number one issue aside from the economy is abortion, and having those conversations with my parents and asking, okay, well, I've had 3 miscarriages, and
Yes.
I had to get a DNC. Do you think I murdered those babies? And
Mm.
them say, I'm not going to answer that question, which by the way is a yes.
Yeah, that is an answer, isn't it?
That's a yes. That's a yes, Like it's really, really, it's hard, And so, I think a lot of people, especially on the right, you'll hear it on the news about people like rolling their eyes about how leftists cut off their like family, but it's like, if my family thinks I'm a murderer for something that I can't, sorry, I'm gonna cry. I wasn't expecting this. My family
Sorry,
thinks I'm a
that's
murderer
the
for
benefit drawback of talking to a therapist. Sorry, Kelsey. But it is emotional. It is emotional because you
yeah.
know the kind of the pain you experience with the miscarriages and having to have a
Mhm.
DNC. That's pain. And then wanting, giving your family the opportunity to then like be supportive of you and then not getting that from them either. It's double. It's double that you're
Yeah.
experiencing. So I can
Yeah. And then
understand.
with this round of the election, in Project 2025, we know that one of the ways that they plan to do a national abortion ban is banning all kinds of drugs that are
Yes.
used in abortions or and a lot of these are also used in family planning,
Yes.
birth control,
Hmm.
those types of things. And a couple of the drugs that I use pretty regularly to help me manage my disease and make it not as invasive. So when I do have
Okay.
to have surgeries, it's laparoscopic surgery rather than it being like a full open
Yes.
abdominal surgery, are going to be deregulated.
Mm.
They're going to not be available anymore. So it's like, okay, cool. So either I go back to being in excruciating pain all of the time and back to that life where I cannot leave my bed without my husband helping me, or I leave the country.
Mm.
Because it's not just like a once off. I mean, potentially, if I wanted to add an extra like 40K travel budget to our bottom, like maybe, but still, like what happens if I have a miscarriage and can't
That's
get a
right.
DNC?
Yes.
Like people don't realize how this, like, it impacts people on an everyday huge level. And that's the other thing, right? Is like, I still look at this and I can say, oh my gosh, this is destabilizing and I'm terrified.
Hmm.
I have not cried one day since this election.
Yes.
I'm really struggling. I have great mental health support. Don't worry, Dr. Patrice. I have a safety plan and a
I'm
binder.
very glad to hear that, Kelsey.
I
I'm
know
very
what you
glad
know
to hear
what that
that.
means. And for the people that are listening, that's what happens when you get grippy socks twice because you get put in the psych ward multiple times. Is they make you make a safety plan, and we're like, I'm trying my best, but it's really really hard. And I think people, I still know that I am one of the most privileged people to even consider leaving is an
Yes.
immense place of privilege.
Well,
Like
Kelsey,
I'm.
how do you keep that awareness, right? Because for all the reasons that you shared, you could, feel like, okay, I have all these things coming at me. I don't know what's going to happen if all these things come at me and all this uncertainty. And then yet you're still able to see like, and I have privilege as well. And I'm really interested in that because I think a lot of people can be in one area, rightfully so, and it's hard to keep both things in mind. So how do you do that?
Not well. I don't know.
but
Like
but
I
you
said,
do
I
you
cry
have
all
that
the time.
awareness, and it's just really it's not an
Yeah.
easy thing. So I just want to acknowledge and honor
I
that you have that.
Thank you. No, I make really dark jokes all of the time. I don't know. Like I'm the most inappropriate person you're ever gonna meet because it's a survival tactic.
Yes.
Uh, and it's really interesting. It was okay. Are you ready? You're gonna be so angry when I tell you this story, but it's
Okay.
great for this podcast.
Okay. Tell me.
Okay. You're like, give me their number. Um, a couple of days. I'm not gonna lie. After the administration or after the election,
Mhm.
I was definitely dealing with. I was suicidal. I
Okay.
was,
Hmm.
because I had read Project 2025 multiple times. Like we were on coalitions for Kamala's campaign.
Yes.
Like we were very involved in it. It was nonstop every day, and I think it's what had to be done because we had such a short amount of time to try to win the election
Hmm.
and like people's lives matter and people but it was so traumatizing. I remember I was living in New York at the time. My husband and I wanted to move to New York. TBD if that happens still, but I was kind of doing a test run out there for us before we moved out there, and I remember just like walking around outside and like wanting to scream at every single person I saw
Yeah.
and just be like, "Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do
Yes.
this to me? Did you like?" I just felt like, do you know what I mean? Like, I
Hmm.
think especially when everyone that raised you to be loving endorses this, you don't trust anyone
That's
anymore.
right. That's right.
You don't even trust yourself, and
Yes.
so I knew what RFK was going to do for me personally. And like at the height of my endo pain, I was suicidal every single day. Like
Yes.
this is not, I have attempted suicide multiple times and been hospitalized for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, not ashamed to say that.
Yes.
I think it needs to be conversations around this need to be normalized. Um, and I was fighting with everything I had to not do that. Like I remember literally sitting on the subway or like sitting there like contemplating just like jumping
Mm,
and
Kelsey.
waiting, and it was so scary because the fact, and it's exactly what we just spoke about, the fact that like I was terrified for myself, but also knowing how many people that I knew and loved were going to be impacted by this immediately, and also knowing the millions of people that I don't know that I want to advocate for are going to be impacted by
Mm-hmm.
this. It just was so overwhelming. Like, and I remember I had a meeting with one of the most senior people in my industry, who's the chief of DEI, and them telling me, "Oh, it's gonna be fine." That face.
Yes.
Oh, we just got to keep fighting. And it's one that I just think a lot of, and this is somebody who prides themselves on being a safe space and, practicing psychologically safe workspaces. And I was like,
Yeah.
if you are leading marginalized communities in any capacity, you need to never say this again in a meeting.
Right? Because I
Like,
mean,
you
you're
need
talking
to,
about like gaslighting and like invalidating someone's experience. Like, in your soul, it is not okay. And someone
it's
telling you
not
that
okay.
feels terrible. It feels terrible for
And
someone to tell you something that you know
especially
is not true.
100%. And especially somebody who is positioned to be like
That's right.
the head of DEI, like advocating for marginalized communities. Like, can I swear?
Sure.
I think I have like 5 times and probably didn't realize it. Are you fucking kidding me?
I think it's
Okay.
going to be fine.
I have to be talking about, but also Pilar introduced us, so she knows. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
Yeah,
you are not safe to be leading people if that's your response when people are in
that's
crisis,
right. Not
and
safe.
especially if you're in DEI work, you're going to be working with people who are in crisis
Yes. Yes.
or who have experienced extreme trauma. So either they have to mask it, which is going to increase the rates of suicide if you can't be honest
Mm-hmm.
about how hard you're struggling, or they're not going to work with you. And if
Yes.
you want to create trauma-informed workplaces, like you have to be able to have those conversations. And I think a lot of people don't understand that like talking to somebody who is suicidal or dealing with suicidal ideation is not going to increase their chances
Yes.
of committing suicide. We know this. We know
Yes.
this. It's a
I'm
proven
really glad you
fact. Talk
brought that
about
up, Kelsey, because I feel
it.
like sometimes people they bring their own fears into it instead of like being there
Mhm,
with the person who's in crisis, and they
mhm.
want them to just be okay. And so they're like, it's just gonna be fine, but it's not gonna be fine just because you say it's going to be fine, right? There's other things that
Right.
need to happen, and
Mhm,
you have to be able to sit with someone and like
mhm,
validate their pain. You can't go right
mhm,
to the healing, right? That's not a thing. And
mhm,
so, for you to have that experience, it is upsetting, because uh,
mhm.
that's about them. That's about them not being able to see or acknowledge like the reality of what's going on. And when it's your one job, that's also a problem. It's a real problem.
And it's yeah, exactly. And it's just like, you know, I remember when I went, okay, I'm just gonna be cheeky and funny.
Go for it.
The first time I went to the psych ward, my
Uh-huh.
first day, I always joke that, listen, there's not many people that go once, let alone
Yeah.
twice. If I ever wanted a side hustle, I could write Yelp reviews on
No.
hospitals for their mental health programs. Like, give me a punch card. The first time I went, I was just like, get me out, get me out, get me out. I didn't want anyone to know I'd ever been
Mm,
there. I
mm.
didn't participate. I literally lied when they were like, are you safe to go home? I was like, for sure. I literally had a plan
Huh.
and I tried to execute it a week later and was back at a different one
Yeah.
like 2 weeks later. And um, what prevented me from seeking the help I needed both times,
Uh-huh.
it was two things. One was stigma.
Uh-huh.
I
Yes.
knew I needed, and I knew I wasn't safe. I knew I wasn't safe to be alone. I knew that I was going to do something, but I didn't want to live with the stigma afterwards. I didn't
Mm.
want to be the girl who was put in a psych ward. I didn't want to be the
Yes.
person who was put in a psych ward. I didn't want any of that. I was so ashamed. Like, and it's so interesting because there's so many people who, it's because I follow them on social media still. And it's like, I didn't have that many friends when I first moved back. But the people who I went to high school with are posting things like if you're, on Suicide Awareness Month or day or whatever, they're like, reach out if you're ever in trouble. I'm like, bitch, I did.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
interesting. Where were you? And I think people just don't know how to comprehend like what support looks like for somebody who's at that level or that state. And then I think the other thing that definitely kept me from it was resources. It is so expensive to get ongoing therapy,
It
especially like I'm not
is.
talking like talk therapy once a week. I needed entire CBT programs. I
Yes.
needed DBT. I needed EMDR. Like I needed medication. I
Mm-hmm.
needed psychology appointments. I needed psychiatrists. Like it wasn't just once a
That's right.
week or
That's
once every
right.
other week. Like
Yes.
it was really expensive. So you know what I had to do? I quit my job and I started intentionally working at a preschool for 6 months so that I would make so little that I would qualify for all of my mental health stuff to be covered. Like that is how systemic this stuff is, right?
Yes.
People are like, "Oh, it's just a choice and you're just being negative." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I literally drove myself into poverty so that I could survive."
Well, and the
And
idea that that's the only way to get the care that you
yes.
need is not all right. It is not all right,
You you
and
cannot
I
say you
think
care
too,
about
like
mental health.
the stigma and the resources that you talked about, and that's why I'm so glad that you're so open with your story because there is so much stigma around it. And like, look, we can have a conversation about it. This is part of your life. It's part of your experiences. It's not something to judge, and you're not it's not like it's just you either. There's a lot of people, and as you say, they don't feel comfortable talking, or when they do reach out, they don't get really like the support that they need a lot of times, or it's not available to them because it is so expensive, and it's not something
Yeah.
that a lot of people can even begin to try to approach, like, no, even when they know that they need the help, right? And so I think
Yeah.
those two things really are, part of the reason that I'm so glad to have this conversation with you,
Mm.
because it's
Yeah.
people need to hear it.
Totally. And I mean, when I went in for the second time, my second stay,
Hmm.
the better of the grippy socks, if you will. One of the things that changed it for me was I had a friend who I'd known a handful of years,
Hmm.
and she came to visit me. And I don't know how she found out that I was there, but I was really I was glad she came. And she had introduced me to another friend, um, and she was like, her mom died from suicide, and
Mm.
Faith has experience being here, and would you ever want her to come visit you? And this is somebody who was it was is one of the funniest, smartest, like really successful people that I've known. And I was like, really? And she's like, oh yeah. And I go, are you that? She's been in here? And she's like,
Wow.
yeah, multiple times. And I was like, what? And it just like opened my eyes so much to be like, you know what? If they can be here and carry on and have a
Yes.
successful life and literally go to Yale and be a lawyer
Yes.
and do all the things, I can do it. And so
Hmm.
I think that's one of the reasons I am so like honest and upfront about my mental
Yes,
health
Kelsey.
is like
Hmm.
one, pretending like it's not a thing is not going to help me. It
That's
really
right.
isn't. Like it's not. Let's just be real. It's better
Hmm.
to be real and deal with the issues than be fake and die.
Yes.
Those are the options. And also, I want somebody else out there who needs that intensive help to get it. Like I have
Hmm.
had multiple friends who I have driven to psych, and I will go and I will visit them every single day. Like we've had to stop this podcast a couple times. I don't drive. One of my disabilities prevents me from driving, so we live
Uh-huh.
downtown, so it's easy. But I literally live by the hospital on purpose because that's where I had my mental health breakdown, and that's the
Ah,
unit that helped me. It's like blocks from here, and
wow.
so I've had at least three people that I know, and people literally like I have become friends with people because a mutual connection of ours knew that they were in psych and we're like, Kelsey, do you want to go see him? I'm like, yeah, of course. Like it's
Yes.
just one of those things where like people need to feel like there's a chance and it's not as
Yes, of
stigmatized.
course. Well, and just like your friend did for you, now that you're
Yeah,
doing that for other people, and I mean, for
yeah,
people that but I also imagine in a lot of ways for people that you'll never meet,
yeah,
for them hearing your
yeah. Well,
story
I
and
mean,
seeing your life.
maybe, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I always feel like, if we think we're too busy to support somebody in crisis, like we should probably reevaluate our priorities and how we manage our lives,
Yes.
Like
Yes.
if someone's like, yeah, listen, this person's contemplating suicide constantly and they are looking for support. Can you help? Like, we need to be able to say yes. And it was interesting. One of the things that we did actually proactively, and I'm so grateful for it. I remember the day after Trump won the first time. Like I said, I was a group fitness teacher, and it's so weird. It's one of the weirdest professions in the world. I love it. It was so fun. But people, like, you're one of the first people tell when they're pregnant. You're one of the first people tell when,
Yes, of
anything happens.
course.
Because, like, they need to, like, modify. They're, like, they're nervous, whatever, right?
Absolutely. That's so
I had a
funny.
time one time when someone literally came in and I could tell, like, it was a regular of mine, and I could tell something was wrong. I was like, Monica, what's going on? And she was like, my mom just died, and her mom was in Spain, and she was like, I don't know where else to go. I don't even know if I can do this workout. I was like, I just hugged her, and I was like, okay, well, just sit on the floor if you want. Like, I don't give a shit. Do whatever you want. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just so glad you're here. And so I taught the 5 a.m. class the morning after Trump won, and
Oh, tough.
just zombies. Just zombies. We're talking 75 zombies walked in. Like, no one knew what to do with themselves. And unfortunately, I had the microphone, so I had to go first. I had to say something. And I was like, literally, I go, this fucking sucks. And everyone just laughed. And I was like, I don't know what we're going to do here, but for the next 60 minutes, we're going to exercise, I guess, and we'll figure out what
Yeah.
comes next
But
after
but for
that.
people to show up, right? Because you still like you need that
Yes,
connection, right? Like we were talking about. This is
yes,
part of your routine. You need to, as much as you can
hmm
when you're able to, go
yes,
and get what you need from,
create
that.
community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so I don't teach fitness anymore, but what we did this year is one of my best friends from when I was living in South Africa, they're a trauma informed psychologist
Mhm.
and have led programs that are all about like women and children in conflict areas, like wild. And I told them, I was like, I want to have something available that morning. I don't want to teach a fitness
Yeah.
class, but like, can we just have a grounding session? Can I just pay you to do a
Mm.
grounding session? And they were like, don't pay me, just donate it to this conflict organization that's helping women and children in Palestine. But yes, let's do it. So that's what we did for, like, I have a
Yeah.
mailing list of like a few thousand creatives all around the world who are committed to being more inclusive. And it was just a free session where we're like, okay, come, like, you can be as sad as you want, you can cry, like, we will stay on this call with you as long as you need until you're ready to go back to your day. There's no expectation, like, we can't solve anything, but we're here for you, and we will literally stay on this call until you don't need us anymore. And it was the best thing we could have done. And like, it was really, really hard. And I was crying through half of it. And
Yes.
like, everyone was crying through it. And because people are scared. And it's just like, I think about that leader, right? And I'm like, what if you had done something like this?
Mm.
And it's like, that's
Yes.
what real leadership is. It's not like I don't have all the tools. I I found somebody and I was like, "Can you help me facilitate this?" And they're like, "Yep, sounds good." And within a week, it was ready to go. Like, that's what support looks like.
So, one thing that I wanted to, in wrapping up, like to talk about with you is for listeners who want to do more than vote, right? Or more
Yeah.
than post things on social media, but they don't know where to start. What's your message to them? How can they support the disability community today? Especially like in the face of all this high stakes environment.
Yeah, so there's a few different things. The first, I would take that lesson from what I learned in South Africa from my leader there, which is ask people what they need.
Yes.
It's never going to serve you wrong to ask people what they need.
Hmm.
And that you may not be able to deliver what they need. And I think that's also something that's worth noting is like you may ask people what do you need and they may say, if you ask me what I need, I would say need either my medication to not be deregulated down the line and insurance that's not going to happen or a way out of the country.
Yeah.
And you may not be able to give that to me,
Yeah.
right? But like asking so that you
Yes.
can keep your ears open about like, okay, oh, I heard this organization is taking this thing and like just like being aware
That's
of
right.
it and
That's a great
offering, right? That's a
suggestion.
huge thing.
Hmm.
And then I think also like on just like a human level, and this is, I mean, you will like this. It feels cheesy and silly to people like me who are not in mental health all the time. But one of the best tips I learned, and I'll just summarize it like this, is make yourself lunch or
Mm.
make your friend lunch. So one of my friends, when I think a lot of times self love or self care, people think of it as like meditation retreats or
Yes.
like
Yoga. Yes.
going
A
to
bath.
expensive yoga classes. And like, listen, as a former yoga teacher, I think these are all great ideas. But one, it's not practical. And two, like, for instance, that person we were speaking about, they're like, oh, call the Samaritans line. They'll help you. I'm like, oh, really? So do you expect me to be on the Samaritans line 24/7? Because they are not going to say, like, that's not how it works. That's not how suicide hotlines work,
Yeah.
right? But like, helping people care for themselves in the most elementary level is one of
Yes.
the most kindest things that you can do, right? So like when I feel like I can do nothing and I'm just like I am whatever, I hear my friend's voice in my head saying, "Did you eat lunch?" And like half the time I don't want to eat lunch. I like have no appetite, right?
Yes.
But it makes me think about it and like I'm like, okay, maybe if I eat a couple bites, at least I've done something, right? So helping people care for themselves in really practical ways because like our executive function just goes out the window when we're in a trauma response and when we're dealing with suicidal ideation, right? Like it just doesn't exist. So saying things like holding space, deep breathing and saying, "Have you eaten lunch? Can I bring you some water?" Like what's like
Yes.
really simple practical things like that I think are so just ground. It's just helping people ground, right? Like
Yes.
helping like learn what grounding techniques are, the 5 4 3 2 1 method, the
Yes.
alphabet method, like the color method. Like take some time, like you could Google all of those grounding in those phrases that I just said and teach yourself how to do it. One, it will improve your own mental health and your own well-being. And two, then when someone is in crisis, you can do it with
You
them.
have
Like
something. Yes.
yeah, you don't have to be a licensed mental health professional to help people think of 5 things they can see, 4 things they could hear, 3 things they could touch, 2 things they could taste, and 1 thing they could smell. You
Yes.
just need to be a human,
Yes.
like,
Kelsey, I love
um,
those. And you're right. Okay, you're right. I'm entirely predictable, I guess. I love the make someone lunch, like make yourself lunch. Because I do think that sometimes, it's similar to what you said about when you reached out to your friends when you were having like suicidal ideation. If people don't know what to say, sometimes they don't say anything. And that's the worst thing. When we're grieving, people just they don't know what to say. They can't make it better, so they just don't say anything. And
yeah,
there is always something that we can do for each other. Sometimes it's just being there and sitting with someone while they're sad, but you're there, right? Sometimes it's making
yeah,
sure that they eat or drink some water, or that they, help they rest or they learn how to ground themselves, that sometimes you're just there with someone. Even if you can't change policy today,
totally.
you can be
Yeah.
there with people. So I love both of those suggestions.
And then the other thing I would say would be learn about the community, right? Like learn from disabled people, listen to us. Like
Listen. Hmm.
what we are dealing with is a huge attack on our rights. They are
Yes.
turning back Section 504, or they're trying to create fucking autism registries that are like,
Yes.
if you look at like the stages of genocide, it's crazy. And if
Hmm.
you think that they're not trying to attack disabled people
They absolutely
so
are.
that they can scapegoat anyone who criticizes this administration as being mentally unwell and
Yes.
unstable so that they can institutionalize you, like you're nuts. That's
Hmm.
exactly what they're trying to do right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at history, maybe it's not exactly repeating, but it's definitely rhyming right now. And
Yes.
there's a reason that international genocide organizations have red flag warnings for the United
That's
States.
right.
Like,
That's right.
we're terrified and we deserve to be terrified. Like,
Yes.
not that that's good, but it's
It's
real.
real.
And like, you
Yes.
can't gaslight us out of that. And so, learning about it and learning how you can support practically,
Hmm.
not just voting, but like whether it's writing your representatives or creating safety plans to keep people safe, like,
Yes.
those are real things that you can and should be doing. And not in like a, I'm not trying to like fear monger.
Hmm.
I'm just trying to be really realistic about like
Yes.
what the disabled community is really scared of right now. Like autistic people, terrified. There's
Yes.
a reason that like I'm like, okay, I want to pursue an autism diagnosis because my psychologist thinks it's what's happening here, and like at the same time, I don't want to be put on a register. Like there's a
Mm,
reason that I'm like hesitant. You know what I mean? Like it's
absolutely.
really scary. People are terrified. So I think it's always for me, no matter what it is, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's a work project or what I always want to look super personal and how
Hmm.
can I impact one person, whether it's me or someone directly in front of me, like what can I do to make their life better, but then also at the macro of like let me understand this community, let me understand these systems, right? And it's the same thing like I'm from Minneapolis. George Floyd was murdered blocks from my
Mm,
house. Like I actually cannot make police not kill black people by
mm,
myself. I can't do that. But I can learn about the systems and
yes.
I can advocate against systems that harm people and I can show up for my black neighbors.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I really think those are so important. Like, think about the tools that you have and share them with other people. Listen to their stories,
Yeah,
and find out
yeah,
where you can have impact. And sometimes it is with the
yeah,
person that's right in front of you, right? And sometimes it is on a larger
yeah,
level, through advocacy and being an ally and that kind of thing. So, Kelsey, thank
yeah.
you so much. I've learned a lot from you. I
Yes.
really appreciate you
Thanks for having
having this
me. I'm so glad we got
conversation.
connected.
Yeah, and also like and
Yeah,
just being so open and honest, and and in telling your story, right? I really appreciate it.
yeah. Well, may never get work again after I talk about being in the same place again,
It's
but
gonna
that's
be okay.
okay.
You know what? It's
That's all
that
right.
that I believe it.
That's all
It's
right.
gonna there's it's always better to be honest
Yeah,
and to tell the truth,
totally.
right? Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
So Kelsey,
Yeah.
if people
Awesome.
want to find out more about what you're working on,
Yeah.
where can they reach you? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn is a great option if you care about professional updates. My company, what we focus on specifically is changing the narrative surrounding disability so that people, what we know is that marketing and advertising changes perceptions,
Yes.
right? If that weren't true, there wouldn't be the industry. And so if we can start to use that industry to change the way people view disabled people, the way that they vote is going to change, the way that they hire is going to change, the way that they include people is going to change. So that's the focus of my company and my mission. And if you want unhinged updates on my life and mental health, probably Instagram, but I'm not safe for work. Like, just very clear. Like, this is 10 times more safer for work than my Instagram is. So just at your own discretion.
And what's your Instagram handle?
Oh, at Kelsey_Lindell. My husband can take my last name if he wants the same last name. So
Excellent. All right. If you want to find out more information about what I'm working on, I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Therapy with Dr. Patrice. And thank you so much for joining me, Kelsey.
yes, thanks for having me.